Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Long Game Podcast with an extremely sweaty Jason Osborne. You can't see it there on the screen, but Jason is wearing a short sleeve shirt because he said he wanted to show everybody that he
My
was
guns.
natural, that the steroids have
You don't
started.
need the steroids, kids. That's my message for today.
Yeah. I just heard an interesting fact about steroids that they were initially prescribed in like the early 20th century after being discovered for curing male depression and low libido. And people didn't actually know that they had an athletic advantage conferred upon the person who was taking them. But there was a period where it was not banned to take steroids in sporting events, and the reason they discovered this was a problem was one year in the 1950s, randomly, the Soviet team took home loads of gold medals for powerlifting in the Olympics, and nobody could explain why because they were pretty average before that. And then they looked into it and they realized, oh, I guess this is something that we should be looking into. But yeah, it's pretty wild that
The more
during
you know.
like during the Cold War, you have the Soviets with like a Captain America serum, but it's actually just steroids. It's nothing. It's not nearly as
But
cool.
even as you were delivering this fact, though, I was thinking that I couldn't help but zoom out for a second. I think I would love to get like an accurate mental map of what's going on in your head most of the time, because you often come out with these completely disconnected facts to one another. You're like a sort of Mr. Wikipedia who's got these like really, I don't know, in-depth facts on different topics that don't obviously connect to one another.
I know everything about nothing. That's Isaac Newton used to call
Yeah.
certain types of people smatterers, which is where you're not a specialist in anything, but you've just got. And he hated those people. So apparently, I'm glad that. But with that said, today we were going to jump into a number of fascinating topics of the day. The first of all, we should do some housekeeping by talking about Gript's newest project, which was labored over intensively primarily by our colleague Gary Kavanagh, who
Mhm.
has developed The Cost of Politics. And for those who haven't seen it, this is effectively a single centralized database on the Gript website wherein you can see how much money has been paid to TDs, senators, different political parties, their staff, and so on over the last 10 years. And the problem, you see, this information is all supposed to be publicly available, but the issue is it's all spread out. It's in different files. You have to go searching for it and send an email to this person, and then they redirect you to them, and you have to
Yeah.
submit an FOI, and the FOI gets rejected. And so it's kind of almost designed to be as opaque as possible for the ordinary person. And so now, thanks to Gary's very laborious efforts, all of that has been pulled together into a single resource. How have you been finding it, Jason, as you've been perusing the site?
Yeah, it's extraordinarily interesting, and I'd like to give people just an example that's right up the top, so we're not really sort of giving anything out for free that's there for subscribers, because obviously, as we say, it's a resource there for subscribers. Like up the top, we have the total cost of the houses of the Oireachtas between 2015 and the end of 2023, which, without spoiling anything, comes to around 1.15 billion. So these are the sort of things that, yeah, if you'd wanted to know this previously, you would have had to go through reports by yourself. You would have been having to look on the Oireachtas website. You would have been having to send in your own FOIs and whatnot. So it is a transparency project ultimately. And I think that more than anything else is what's required in Ireland, in Irish politics, I would say at the moment. Because it's just, these are crazy sums of money. And I think the vast majority of people would have no idea that it's this sort of money that's being spent, on politics. And we have it open here, or I have it open here, I should say, in front of me. Like, you can have a look at the total state funding of TDs between the election of 2016 and the end of 2023, the total state funding of political parties since 2015. So, and then we also go through each of the TDs individually in terms of their expenses and their salaries and all of these kinds of things. So it's a really interesting resource, and it's going to expand in future. We're going to be adding in all sorts of data that can be presented in this sort of manner that's gathered through FOIs. I already know one that I believe we're going to be putting into it based on some stuff that I got back from FOIs. So it's yeah, it's an exciting project, and I think it's a really useful resource for those, as many Gript readers are, who are interested in developing a bit of a culture of transparency and hopefully changing the climate a little bit that way.
Changing the climate now, that's something that
Oh,
we got to stay well away from. But in general, I agree with the essence of what you said, because one of the elements here that I think is important to note is that they rejected many of the requests that we put in. And so we still have to add certain information because it's being withheld, we believe, in an illegitimate manner from us. Because this is the kind of thing, if you can't even tell how much your political parties and your politicians are being paid, you would have thought that's transparency 101. There's certain things that you would like to have access to, certain documents and pieces of information that you think would reasonably be released to the public, but you can kind of quibble about them or you can argue and you can go back and forth. This is absolutely fundamental. I mean, this is the kind of thing that the state, frankly, should be doing. I mean, the government already has whereyourmoneygoes.ie, which gives an annual breakdown of the budget going back years, and you can see how much went on health and how much went on housing and so on. The fact that something like that wasn't done for individual politicians, I think, is kind of madness. And the fact that it was left to a small publication like us to do all of this work sort of says it all about the priorities and the democratic norms, our precious norms that we value so much in this state.
yeah, and I mean, it is important to note as well that it has fallen to an organization like Grip to do it. And I think sometimes people sort of express annoyance to say certain things are behind a paywall or they can't access this or that on Grip's website because they sort of rightly perceive Grip as being a very accurate or a very useful tool, I suppose, for the public and their sort of, advocacy for better political rules or a better cultural conversation, things like this. But it's like this isn't the sort of thing you're able to pull together with like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. This requires like dedicated work on a daily basis that, yeah, spans big long times. I'm well familiar with how long it takes to get particular FOI cases and different things like that across the line, because sometimes they'll come back to you and say, I can't release that for reasons of commercial interest. Like if this information were released, it wouldn't be favorable to say this organization. I have an FOI case, an FOI appeal like to that effect going on at the moment with a department. So, which hopefully something will come back from in the near future. But it's all just to say that it's all very resource intensive, and so it is. If you do care about this stuff, it's worth a subscription because we're doing our best and expanding it as we can. And I think again, it's a really useful addition to the public space. I was only chatting to someone over the weekend about the bike shed scandal, which obviously everyone was so infuriated by. And it is mind boggling that we still don't know who signed off on that.
Yeah.
Like, it is nuts. That was the scandal of, scandal of, I can't even remember when it happened now because so many things happened since then. But it's something that really, there should have been an answer to very quickly because it wouldn't be a very hard thing to find out from the inside. But they sort of closed wagons, and now you just there's nothing you can do about it if they don't want to tell you. So it's things like that that have to change and ultimately that have to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And briefly, people are under no obligation to subscribe to any outlet or any service. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that if you don't want to subscribe or you can't afford to subscribe or something that means you're doing something wrong. I'm not saying any of that. But there is a certain streak. You do see the occasional comment from people who get indignant when something is paywalled, and they kind of go like I remember seeing one guy say, I would never pay for news. Like I'm not paying for news under any circumstances. And his tone was kind of like almost, how dare you even ask? And the point of the matter is, as you say, Jason, this stuff is not free to do. Like, this is a full-time job for us. If we weren't doing this as a job, like if I was working somewhere else
In Centra.
yeah, if I was working in Centra, if I was working at like a marketing agency or something, and then I was doing this on the side as a hobby, you would not get results like the cost of politics. Not that I worked on it; it was Gary's project. But you understand the point I'm making, that these things, like just to reference some of the other stuff we've done, like the public consultation story I did, where I had to go through thousands and thousands of individual submissions for a public consultation to the hate speech bill, and catalog them as I went and calculate them. Like that took hours and hours, like days of work, relentlessly going through that to end up with the result that we did. Jason has worked on similar projects. All of our, Fatima is there in the courts all day, every day, having to listen to court cases and report on them. So the point is, this stuff does not happen if there aren't people willing to dedicate their full time to it. And the reason we can dedicate the full time to it is because people subscribe. And the more people subscribe, the more staff we can take on. And then you can have more people doing this so that you get more projects like the ones that we're talking about here. So again, people are under no obligation. If people can't afford it, I understand. But that's why we ask for subscriptions. It's not just so that we can be wearing Rolexes and riding around in Yachties. It's
Although, Ben, you do those things.
Although I do those things, I'd have to take up my diamond encrusted chain off earlier and hang it up out of frame because I thought it'd be tacky. But
You look very incongruous driving through Longford.
yeah. I think people would make certain assumptions about me if I was doing that. But so yeah, absolutely. If everybody wants to check it out, I'm sure we will have a link in the description to that project, and we would invite you to see what you can find and subscribe if you haven't already done so to get more. We have lots of projects like that in the works, and you'll be learning about those hopefully in the very near future. What else did we want to talk about today, Jason?
I can take over, although I'll note, as I'm saying, that I'm struggling to within an inch of my life here not to breathe out of my mouth because I'm absolutely smothered with a cold at the moment. And we didn't even clarify, you said at the beginning of the thing that I'm sitting here sweating like a pig. We never even clarified that it's really bloody hot. It's not that I'm just sweating freakily on a given...
About
I knew that Ben was going to give me some hard questions today, but sweating like a pig here in Dublin. But as well as I'm smothered with a midsummer's cold, which is always a pain in the ass. So I'm fighting fiercely not to breathe out of my mouth because that would just be a gift to Gript haters, essentially, if they see me sitting here talking like. So, well, we wanted to just, with that necessary context out of the way, if people do see me gasping for breath as I go on, we wanted to discuss kind of one of the stories of the moment, which is the sort of reporting around attacks on Ireland's Indian community. The latest development in this being that the Taoiseach Simon Harris is, I don't think he has yet, he's due to meet with members of the, I think they're called the Ireland India community, something along those lines. And this comes in response to, say, couple of videos and reports related to attacks on Indian citizens living in Ireland. And we wanted to discuss it just because it's a big topic of the moment. Clearly, it's being reported on by a number of publications, and as I say, Simon Harris has now decided to meet with this group, who I can certainly say on an anecdotal level, I know quite a few Indians because there are quite a few Indian Catholics living in Ireland, for example. And they have told me, whether people believe me and their testimony or not, but they have told me that Indians are notably more fearful. Now, obviously, the question that people would ask on the basis of that is whether that fear is justified. But suffice to say, I think it is fair to say that amongst Indians, there is a sort of heightened tension for them in Ireland. And it's such a multifaceted thing, because when it comes to, so there's been a couple of sort of viral incidents of Indians being attacked. There was the most famous one was the guy in Tala who was sort of stripped to his waist and attacked, but there was also another one going around last week where I'm not sure where it was in Dublin. I'm not sure whether Gardaí were looking into it. There wasn't very much reporting done on this one that I could see, even though there was a lot of talk about it, of a group of people sort of harassing and sort of slapping at an Indian guy. And I think the primary thing to say is obviously that is wrong. Indeed, in that latter video, the people who appeared to be doing this were saying things like, we're Catholic. This is a Catholic country. Get out of here. You know, you and I are Catholics. I can't imagine God having any sort of favorable take on that. It certainly isn't the sort of thing that the religion condones, or that there's any room for, really. So that's sort of the primary thing to say. And I do think that um, the primary responsibility lies with the people doing this. Now, this is me getting to sort of speculative territory. It strikes me that the people probably carrying out these attacks are the sort of people who, would have attacked another person anyway. It's just that obviously immigration has become the hot topic at the moment, and therefore it's sort of put targets on the backs of, say, different groups that are sort of largely represented in Irish society now, foremost among which are the Indians. I mean, my understanding is currently the latest figure that we have for the number of Indians in Ireland is something like 80,000. But while that's lower than other groups, like, say, the Poles traditionally, it is the fastest growing by a country mile. I think in the past couple of years, it's absolutely skyrocketed. So, having said as well that the primary responsibility lies with the people doing the attacks, and they absolutely are culpable and ought to be subject to justice, it's also the case that some responsibility has to be attributed to, I would say personally, the government, because they were warned as far back in 2022 in relation to sort of the influx of Ukrainians coming to Ireland because of the war over there, that an influx of asylum seekers, they said then, although I think it applies more broadly to immigration. I have the quote here exactly. Give me 1 second. Yeah, they were warned that a mass influx would have downstream effects on local population, and in particular deprived communities, that, quote, creates risks for social cohesion and integration. That was reported by The Independent back in 2022. Um, Looking at just sort of the tensions between the different like ethnic groups in Ireland, for want of a better way of putting it, it's not a good thing, but this is what that breakdown in social cohesion looks like. I don't know what people think it looks like. It was an avoidable situation, and in saying that, I don't excuse in the slightest the people doing it, but it's just to say that when people were warning of things like this is exactly what they were talking about. And I think, and I would be of the opinion that as long as sort of immigration continues unhindered, it gives me no pleasure to say you're going to see more things like this, and it won't be limited to just the Indian community. It won't be limited to whichever particular group it happens to be on any given day. I think it's just a very ugly situation, and I think it was an entirely avoidable one.
Yeah, I agree with almost all of that. I would say as well, to expand on a point you referenced there, I'm not convinced how much of this is particularly targeted at certain immigrant populations. And obviously, that sounds crazy to some people listening to this. They're going to say, "What do you mean?" Of course, it is. They referenced the person's ethnicity or nationality during the attack or whatever. What I think about this is what a friend and colleague of ours said. Gript's cameraman and video editor is Indian, and I was talking to him about this beforehand, and he referenced how his mother was being hassled by a group of delinquent youths, shall we say, who were, insulting her, making racist comments to her, just giving her general grief and spitting at her. But then when a Dublin bus came by, they started throwing stones at the bus. So what that says to me is these are just your garden variety scumbags who are a nuisance and a menace to every single person they encounter: Indian, Irish, Polish, Catholic, Protestant, atheist. They're just gutter mouthed scumbags, basically. And the fact of the matter is, if I saw a group of lads in trackies on bikes coming down the road, talking loudly amongst themselves, I would probably cross the street. You would probably cross the street. We
No, I
all
wouldn't.
know what these sorts of guys. Yeah, no, Jason would beat them up. But the fact of the matter is, like, these guys are not. It's not like in every other area of their life they're extremely decent, law-abiding members of society, and now suddenly when they encounter an immigrant, then they become a violent pogrom. Like, it's not like that. They are antisocial, I'm trying to restrain my language here and speak a little bit more diplomatically than I want to speak, but they are menaces to society, to put it as in a politically correct way as I can. And so, unfortunately, because they are menaces to society, then everybody who is in society, including immigrants, are going to fall victim to them. So I think
Uh,
in
I was just gonna.
is that has more of a factor to play here than actual direct racism necessarily.
Yeah, I do
By the
think
way,
that's. I
I
do
need to
think.
be absolutely clear that not only is that not a defense of them, that's a condemnation of them further. I'm not excusing or explaining away. I'm saying not only are they scumbags to immigrants, which is awful, they're also scumbags to all of us, and that's why we should all crack down on them like a ton of bricks. That's the argument I'm making.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that for the most part. I think it is the case that it was everyone who went to school in Ireland has some sort of story about I obviously live in Dublin. Well, lived in Dublin my whole time in school. And getting the Lewis to and from school was always it was pretty frequently the case you'd be harassed by someone looking for something give me your phone or a battery, that kind of thing. And I do feel like it was always going to be the case that, I say, the makeup of society changes. And I mean, the latest understanding we have is that was 1 in 5 people living in Ireland now was not born in Ireland. So, that's an absolutely huge shift, first of all. But it's also the case that those people aren't going to be immune from, the same thuggery that strikes while you're out and about. And it's also the case that, typically this isn't particularly highbrow and antagonization. So if you have something notably different about you, in my case being, as I embarrassingly revealed previously, 5'6", I'm likely to be called a dwarf or something like this. Although that sort of a erudition might be beyond the sort of person to do it. Whereas, obviously, if you're from India, they're likely to make some sort of comment to that effect. Or if you're from an African country, they might make some comment to that effect. Again, it isn't to justify it or explain it away, but I do think that's probably the primary dynamic. I do also think at the same time, though, again, because you do want to, I'm not going to fall into some black and white narrative on this. I do think it's a complex thing. I do think that because this immigration and the hugely changed makeup of Irish society has become such a hot topic, uh, even a lot of these guys might be more sensitive to the presence of, say, foreigners in different places. And so I don't know, it might make them, even slightly more inclined to go out of their way to go after someone. Not saying that is the case, but I'm saying I could see how that would factor into it. But suffice to say, I do think it's hugely ugly, and I do think, again, the primary condemnation lies with the people, carrying out these attacks. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I have Indian friends who are very good people living in Ireland who have said that they or family members are genuinely more fearful. Whether readers feel that's, or listeners in this instance feel that's justified, they can make up their own minds on that. But the fact that that's the case, it seems to me to be borne out in reality. But I think the whole reason it's just such a mess is because it was probably uh the exacerbating it was avoidable, I would say, to put it that way. I don't think any of this has been helped, not just by immigration policy, but also, perhaps even primarily, by, as we spoke about last week in a bit of a choppy podcast, a complete breakdown in law and order. Well, maybe not complete because it hasn't completely broken down, but a pretty bad breakdown in law and order where, you'll see lads riding through. I saw it just recently there, lads flying through the city centre on scramblers. I'm not even sure how guards would stop that. They're not able to match their speed in their cars going through the city center.
They can't match
Um,
their freak.
they can't match their freak exactly. It's like sort of PC plod following after these lads who uh, look like they zoomed straight out of Mad Max or something like this.
They're
So they're
literally like balaclavas have become the norm in the city center. Like you see people going around wearing ski masks. I don't know what it is,
yeah,
skis or whatever. And since COVID in particular, that's become just like a feature of fashion. So that kind of tells you all you need to know. And I mean, I
and
wrote
just
this. Sorry, go ahead.
I literally was going to make the point as well, lest someone somehow and further were sort of making the inference that it's, just Irish antagonization towards other people. As Fatima's court reports show, those new to the parish, to put it that way, are plenty well represented in carrying out violent crimes of every variety. So there's that as well.
I was going to say just that there's probably going to be people screaming at their TV or their phone right now, and who are rightfully irritated by this, because they're going to say, why is all of the media focus on the incidents, the terrible incidents when an immigrant is attacked by an Irish person, and yet when an Irish person is attacked by an immigrant, we get total radio silence, and the press doesn't want to touch it with a barge pole. I mean, again, we're restricted in what we can say about ongoing court cases, and so we have to be careful how we discuss things. But there was an incident recently, which most people will be familiar with, of a guy screaming Allahu Akbar after allegedly, apparently doing something very problematic, shall we say, in the city center. And the media was very quick to remind us that this person is an Irish citizen and nothing to see here, and so on and so forth. So, in cases like that, where the media wants to downplay immigrant crime as much as humanly possible and
And
play up Irish crime towards immigrants as much as humanly possible, I think people are right to note the disparity there, and also to be indignant about it, because it is happening and it is unfair.
and to be annoyed by the fact that that bloody dynamic is very much what contributes to tension in society, and I'd say sort of further contributes to, uh, absolutely crumbling support or trust in media and things like this. The government, for all of its hogwash about, trusted high quality journalism and valuable public service media, as long as they engage in things like this, it's just going to keep plummeting. And you're absolutely right. I saw it in an article just this morning where, again, yeah, all of the focus presently is on, say, you would assume, Irish violence towards immigrants or people who've moved to Ireland and made it their home. And it's like, okay, that is wrong, but also maybe acknowledge this other thing, which is clearly picking up and which is a genuine problem too, which is, the case of violent people coming to the country. And that one received, yeah, as I say, people won't touch that with a barge pole, or the media, I should say, won't touch that with a barge pole. So it's just, we had a bit of a toxic mess already prior to sort of the recently particularly big influxes, or sort of law and order influxes of migration and law and order incidents, and we've only added to it with all of these different elements.
And you know what's so frustrating as well is that you always hear people talk about how, oh sure, the Irish went everywhere, and the Irish, we're a nation of immigrants and all this kind of crap. The fact of the matter is, if that is the case, and it is the case, we all know that's true, then we should learn from history and be aware of the fact that this exact story played out when we went to places like America. The Irish were engaged in crime. The Irish mob was a huge thing, and we were the victims of discrimination. You'd see people, mistreating Irish immigrants and treating them poorly, and then that fueled the criminality. Like one thing that we don't even, I think a lot of people aren't cognizant of, is there's the notorious El Salvadorian gang MS-13, who are known
Mm.
for being ruthless. These are the guys with face tattoos who are willing to cut your head off, and they're extremely dangerous group of people. They actually didn't even start in El Salvador. They started in California. And the reason they started in California was El Salvador had a civil war in the 20th century. After the Civil War, loads of people were forced to flee the country as refugees. They went to America. They settled on the West Coast. And then while they were there, they were this new kind of vulnerable immigrant community. So then other groups, including other groups of immigrants, would prey on them and beat them up and attack them. And so they had to kind of click up and form these groups to defend themselves. And then those turned into gangs. And then before you know it, they're this hardened street gang who are cutting people's fingers off and shooting people in the head. So anyway, my point is not to say that something like that is happening in Ireland or will happen in Ireland. I don't know. My only point is, when you chuck a group of people into the deep end of a totally different country, you're going to see weird, unforeseen social phenomenon taking place, and not all of them are going to be good. And we have predicted this in the form of government reports that told the government, this is probably going to lead to a break in social cohesion. And I am convinced it's not even like a lot of people think that the government has this grand, evil Machiavellian plan where they're trying to
Mhm.
destabilize society, or, like you hear all these theories that people come out with. I don't even think it's that elaborate. I doubt they've thought about this at all. I don't think they've
Yeah.
considered it. I don't think it crossed their mind how this could go wrong. And I think they're as shocked as anybody could be with the end result that we could have told them would have happened in advance.
Well, that many people did tell them would happen in advance. I think this is one of the most frustrating aspects of it, which is that many of the elite, in certainly in Europe and most particularly in Ireland, do live in something of a utopian world where everyone is of goodwill, and then when bad things happen, it's like genuinely shocking to them. It's like how could this have happened?
It's like the Dublin portal, the Dublin New York portal, where
Oh yeah,
you open a live webcam on the street, and then people are showing pornography and 9/11 memes and
memes.
things, and they're just shocked and horrified. How could this happen?
Yeah, they genuinely thought people would, like, I don't know, be doing cyber hugs and kisses and things like that. It's just a degree of detachment from reality that's really hard to fathom. I think you and I think I can speak for you in this. Being Catholics, you are more sensitive to this because you sort of understand humanity as being sort of fallen and being marred, and so there's a lot of ugliness, and indeed all of the ugliness in the world can be traced back to that. But you are not under the illusion, say, that people are better than they are. And like this is stamped all over say Simon Harris talking about what's going on at the moment between Ireland and India, for want of a better way of putting it. Like his response to this is reporting from the Journal. Taunish is quoted as saying, "This is a good country. This is a country of Céad Míle Fáilte. This is a country that recognizes the incredible value that the Indian community have made. It's a country that abhors racism, and we must continue to call it out." It's like, well, indeed, there's a great many people that note the value that many Indian immigrants have brought to Ireland, and as indeed they have, and that abhor racism. But it's like, it's not just this land of sunshine and rainbows, nor is anywhere. It's like, good things and bad things happen here, they happen elsewhere. The world is just a dynamic place, and the most dynamic feature of the world is the human being. And it's like, you can't bring about enormous change as migration policy has here and elsewhere and expect it all to come out to the good, which these people really do. It's nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if even if they were willing to say, on balance, we think immigration is good, but here are the downsides and we're aware of them, and it's not illegitimate to have those concerns. Even then we could at least have a conversation, but they're not even willing to make that very reasonable concession, which I think is just sort of indicative of the lack of maturity that we're dealing with here. Um, what else did we want to oh yeah, today I wanted to touch on this and maybe get your thoughts in a little bit more detail on this, because it's sort of maybe related to the dilapidated state of our own country, and I think it has a lot of relevance today. That I wrote an op-ed where I was basically arguing that people should be less concerned with the crises and disasters that are happening all around the world. And what prompted me to, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was literally going to say that. Maybe explain why you decided to write this, because I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I opened RTE this morning to just take a look at the day's events and see was there anything worth commenting on. And the very first thing I saw was about an earthquake in Turkey that killed a number of people. And obviously that's tragic. God bless the people of Turkey. God bless everybody who was affected by that, and maybe who either died or lost a loved one or something. Those people have my utmost sympathy. And as we keep referencing in this podcast, we are Catholic. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that you are not allowed to be apathetic to any human suffering. You're not allowed. My faith forbids me from just saying, yeah, a bunch of people died and I don't care. It's not my problem. Good luck to you. Like, I am not allowed to have that mindset, and I don't have that mindset. But as I was looking at this story about this earthquake in Turkey, all I could think was, I can't help these people in any way, practically. I can't do anything about this. And so I'm after just upsetting myself first thing in the morning on a Monday morning for no one's benefit. And you get these people, all of us, I'm going to include myself in this because I'm guilty of this too, as much as anybody. We, as a society, have this tendency to become extremely emotionally invested in wars and natural disasters and other things that we can't affect, to the neglect of things that we can affect that are happening on our own doorstep. And I think that's a real failure of having the right perspective. And it's also, in some ways, not always, but it can be a form of virtue signaling where you want to communicate to yourself and to other people, look what a moral, virtuous person I am because I'm so invested and I'm so up to date on the latest goings on in this famine or this or that or whatever's happening somewhere, while not actually doing anything about it. Like, it's one thing if you're a policymaker or you're a global player who can actually influence it and who is working to influence it positively and
Yeah.
help out. If you're Elon Musk and you hear about a tsunami and you're like, you know what, I want to invest however many million towards a charitable cause to try and help there, that's completely different. Or if you're a politician or something like that, if you're the UN, fine, I expect you to be aware of these things and to want to help. And if you're even an ordinary person and you hear about something and you go, Janie Mac, that's awful. I'm going to give some of my money in charity to a relevant NGO that's working in the area to help them. Again, that's completely different. But if you're just reading news all day, every day about horrible, horrible things, pregnant women getting killed and children getting killed and people getting their heads cut off by cartels and all this madness, I'm not sure that's good for you or for society at large. And I think when you say that, I want to hear your thoughts on this, so I'm gonna let you get in now. But just I think when you make the argument I just made, people accuse you of wanting to stay ignorant, which is not the case. I do think that people should be aware of what's happening in the world in a broad sense. Like, you should be aware that there's a slave market in Libya, and that people are being sold into slavery, because that's a fact about the world. It's a very grim fact that you should be aware of. But as for the nitty gritty, grimy, disgusting details, that part I'm not sure is constructive for most people to be aware of. And also, people will say, "Oh, you just don't care. You're being callous. You're
You're
saying
sitting on the fence.
you're sitting on the fence." But actually, as I've said on this podcast before, it's not about not caring. It's about caring too much. It's saying, if I hear about this horrible thing that happened in Cambodia, I'm going to be upset about it because I do care. And I don't want to be upset about it if it's not going to help somebody, which it won't. So I don't want to know about it. That's the bottom line. And I think that's a pretty reasonable position to take. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I can't help but think that one of the characters who very much symbolizes our times, um, is one written by Charles Dickens in Bleak House, Mrs. Jellyby. She's a sort of satirical character, and her whole thing is that she expends enormous amounts of effort and resources to set up missions in Africa, while she has needy people in need of help right in front of her in her area that she like neglects. She's busy sort of expending all of her effort, her moral and resource intensive effort, further afield, while she's like completely neglecting what's going on right in front of her. And I do feel like that's somewhat symbolic for our times. I entirely agree with pretty much everything you said. It's funny, we're dealing with contentious issues on this episode today, but there's not much contention between us. I think we're in agreement on a lot of these things, as yeah, Catholics sort of often are on things, particularly when it comes to moral matters. Because I think obviously the prime example, people will be reading into this would be, say, yeah, what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. I think like there is a huge degree of interest in this in Ireland, and a huge degree of focus on this, both at a political level, but also at a sort of personal level, in terms of people being interested in it and, changing profile pictures to Palestinian flag or whatever. Um, people often wonder what our perspective on these things are just because I suppose we have the platform, yet disclosure. I think that a lot of what's happened in Gaza is absolutely horrendous, and I think that yeah, Israel is morally culpable for those things, just as Hamas is morally culpable for what took place on October 7th. Again, I'm guided by a Catholic framework and worldview, and I think that, there's no such thing as doing bad things that good may come of them. We don't believe in that. I think the bad is bad and you shouldn't engage in it. And indeed, what's happening in Gaza at the moment is horrendous.
Yeah,
So much like
the analogy we made off camera beforehand when we were talking about this was like if you're trying to get a legitimate target, let's say there's an actual bad guy like a terrorist, that doesn't justify shooting through the guy's front windows with his family inside and his kids are ducking under the table and maybe like his granny gets hit in the shoulder or something and you're just lighting up his house saying, well, look, he's a bad guy and he's in there and it's his fault. Like, I don't think that's morally justifiable personally. And I also feel like um if you say that. Anyway, look, sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to throw
No,
in.
not at all. No, it's a thing worth talking about because again, despite, having that perspective, and indeed I do pray about it as I pray about a lot of global things as well, there's only so much little old Jason Osborne can do about it, or little old Ben Scallon, or anyone else. And I know we've also got ourselves into a space where we think, the mass movement of the peoples can bring all of the diplomatic strength of Ireland to bear on the issue, and they'll point to things like, say, Irish diplomatic efforts with the apartheid regime in South Africa and whatnot. And it's like, okay, by all means, do that, have that perspective, but don't make it, this is my opinion now, the moral axis of your life. It's like, I do think it's important. I do think that, people suffering in this or that part of the world is just as important as the suffering here in front of me. But it's like, we're finite creatures. You're put in a particular place and at a particular time, I would say, to work on alleviating the suffering that's around you. And there's this real sense in which, I don't know, people are just, concerned about what's happening, much like Mrs. Jellyby, everywhere around the world. They paralyze themselves with bad news. I think you put it that way in your article earlier, whether it be about that conflict or whether it be about Trump's immigration policy over in the USA, whether it be about any number of the, contentious things happening around the world. And it's like, you getting yourself into a tizzy over these things doesn't help anyone, and it doesn't really do anything. What does do something is sort of getting your priorities properly ordered, forming a moral character, which absolutely foaming on social media doesn't do, whichever direction you happen to be foaming in. And I think that this is one of the great issues and challenges of our time. It's acknowledging that what's going on abroad, or as you put it, in the world more broadly, is important and it's good to know about, and indeed doing what you can for those things, but not allowing them to take center stage in your life, because that's not the proper place for those things. It seems so obvious to me to say that, but clearly it isn't, because a lot of the time now, if you're not seen to be doing everything you can for a particular cause or for a particular relief effort or something like this, you're morally negligent. And I just think that belies a complete lack of the understanding of the moral shape of the world and how you actually can do good in the world. It's getting into sort of fairly philosophical territory, but I do feel like it's an important one to touch on because, like, you see people, whether they're pro-Israeli, whether they're pro-Palestinian, who will justify any sort of conduct by saying that their position is so important they have to behave this way. It's like, if you're, I don't know, saw a video of a guy a while back who was, verbally abusing some Jew on a bus, and a woman was standing up and saying, like, don't do that. It's clearly wrong. It's immoral behavior. She rightly recognized. And he was like, what about the genocide in Gaza? What about the genocide in Gaza? And it's like, it's like, okay, are you abusing this guy on the bus? Is that stopping it? It's like, clearly not. Like, it's so obvious that it shouldn't need saying, but it does, because people have got themselves into robot mode over different issues. But
And
it
then
also works
and then you will get the other side where like Israel will do something and admit to something that was genuinely really bad, like let's say children get killed in an attack or something like that, and they say, "Look, we did that,
Mm.
and it was messed up, and we're sorry." And the only reason I focus on the ones that are admitted is because everybody, it's an information
I
war.
know. Well, yeah, you have to be able to agree on certain things for these examples. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's people say, "Oh, that didn't happen," or "Oh, that was fabricated," or they're lying, or whatever. But there are certain things that have happened that are extremely objectionable that have been conceded.
Say like the World Kitchen workers who, like, as they were driving away, they were hit with targeted munitions and things, and they came out and like apologized about it. And
Exactly, yeah, and you'll bring that up, and there'll be people who are pro-Israel who will try to explain that away or justify it, or maybe not
or
just
attack you as like a useful idiot for like even acknowledging that point, and it's like no.
exactly. Like the way I know I mentioned before in a previous episode how I would love to be a war referee, by which I mean I'm for those who forget what I'm talking about. I am genuinely 100% neutral in almost all conflicts that don't directly involve my own country. Like I have no particular axe to grind with Palestine or with Israel, with Russia or with Ukraine. And so I feel like I can genuinely look at the situation on its own merits and just say, yeah, that was good by them, that was good by them, that was bad by them, that was bad by them. Like I'm actually just impartially observing it. Because again, not to say I don't care about the people, but I don't care about the politics of it one way or the other. It's nothing to do with me. So I would love to be like an official ombudsman or an umpire who can go in and just be like, look, for what it's worth, I think they did it. You know what? If there's like a bomb that fell and both sides are blaming each other, I could be like, look, I looked at the facts and this is what they say, and what do you want me to do? Uh,
Yeah, I think I speak for the international community when I say I'm thankful we actually don't have this particular system in place where you referee all of the world's conflicts. But it's a nice like.
the world would be you'd have a lot more accurate information. I'm telling you, like I would follow.
Or let me hit you with a hypothetical then. North Korea versus uh oh god, Azerbaijan.
Yeah,
Yeah, you completely.
even so, I would listen. If Kim did something wrong, then he should be held accountable for that. But if the supreme leader was innocent of all blame, which I suspect he was because he usually is, then what can we do? You tell the check cleared or but but yeah, the point is like I think if you're looking at a regime and you can't say that like aid workers and children being killed is bad, then you're kind of down a bit of a rabbit hole, regardless of what country we're talking about. And that is
Mm.
true. That is rampantly present, I think, on all sides of the Middle East conflict. Everybody is kind
Yeah, well,
of guilty of that to a
I mean, I think
extent.
again, not to speak for both of us, but I think I would diagnose this issue like the reason like how would I haven't sort of phrased it before or put it into words before, so I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it properly. The reason, say, international issues in the present age with mass media and social media and all of this become so totalizing, where people are able to uh, sort of stake all of their moral worth on which side they take in this particular, normally say war because that's sort of generally very clear sides, but also it relates to like, yeah, where they stand on immigration or like on Trump or something like this. They're able to um take a very clear side on these international issues. The reason those are so totalizing now is because I would say there's like a god-shaped hole in people, and the reason it's easier to do that with international issues rather than domestic ones, although people do it with domestic ones as well, is because it's all the more abstract because it's further afield. It's like for people in Ireland, yeah, well, Trump does have a direct impact on us in terms of, his sort of tariff decisions and things like that. But just use some abstract example, you are able to sort of weigh in on these things from a purely moral perspective, aside from sort of practical considerations, aside from um yeah, the nitty-gritty of reality that presents itself to you when you're in person, when you're dealing with the things that are in front of you. And I think, yeah, it sort of naturally plays out as I would say that when you do have kind of uh, uh, faith or religion or something like this, God loves the concrete, faith loves the concrete, and the concrete is often messy and entangled, and it doesn't lend itself well to sort of, you know, black and white views of things, despite the fact that I do think in instances internationally you can say, well, this is bad, this is good, on every sort of side. But it's just that it's like it speaks to me of a sort of misunderstanding of the purpose of the human person and uh, sort of moral compasses that have gone somewhat haywire.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all of the virtues kind of unmoored from their foundation and gone rampant, which is a great way to wrap up a segment that will no doubt infuriate everybody
Many
regardless
people.
of their perspective. But with that said, thank you all so much for listening. As we said at the outset, if you would like to check out the call of the or the cost of politics project on the Gript website, I'm sure we'll have a link for that in the description, and you can take a look at how your politicians are spending your money and how much of it they're taking home. So, with that said, thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you all next week. God bless.
God bless.